Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is Horror Trans. I am Stephanie Bree. I am a transgender woman. I talk about all things horror. And today is going to be a very touchy video. This is Tales from the Hood. And the reason why I say that is, do you see the color of my face? I am not black. So I am not qualified to talk about the complicated racial complexities and overtones that this movie tackles. This is a very racially aware movie. I am qualified to talk about the horror aspects of this movie. So, backstory. This is an anthology. By and large, I am not a fan of anthologies. Because I get invested in a movie. I want a coherent story. I want a movie. I want 90 minutes of one story, or 2.5 hours around thereabouts, depending on how good the story is. I don't want 15-minute snippets spread across a 90-minute movie. It's not enough time to tell a story, and sometimes they cram a lot of shit in there. However, Tales from the Hood is one of the few I do enjoy. Somewhat. Obviously, as a white person, this movie makes me uncomfortable because it's supposed to, because it wants you to deal with racial inequality in this country, and this movie puts it in your face. So let's just briefly touch on the horror aspect. And I don't want to spoil it just in case you haven't seen it, but basically, you have these three drug dealers who are at a funeral home where they're there to pick up some drugs that this funeral home director found in an alley. And as they're walking through the funeral home and looking at dead bodies, he's telling them the stories of how the person whose body is in the casket died. So you have 4 stories, and I'm not going to tell you about the stories because, again, I don't want to spoil this movie, and I don't want to get into the themes of this movie because I don't feel qualified. I'm just going to say briefly, what they are and scary or not. The first one is about a bunch of cops who kill a black man, a politician, a local city council member or something of that sort. And then one of the black cops, who was a bystander, who didn't do anything to protect the black man that they killed, lures the police to his grave sometime later, a year later or sometime later, and his corpse comes out of the ground and kills the cops. The second story is about a little boy who's being abused by his stepdad. Physically abused, beaten by his stepdad. And is using illustrations of the stepdad as a monster, and as a metaphor, the stepdad as a monster. The third story is about a racist white politician who moves into the home of a plantation owner, former slave owner, former plantation, and gets attacked by the spirits of the dead slaves that the slave owner murdered after the slaves were freed following the end of the Civil War. The fourth story is about a gang member who's a murderer who gets into a gunfight with the police and somehow miraculously survives, and instead of going to prison, he gets put in this rehabilitation system where he's put in a cell with the literal Nazi white supremacist who tells him, as a black man, he's doing, quote, the Lord's work by killing other black men for him, doing his racial cleansing for him. And then he has to confront the spirits of the victims of his gun violence. And that's as much as I'm going to tell you about this movie, Because, like I said, I don't want to spoil the ending, and I don't want to get into the themes, because this movie's really fucking heavy. It is a damn good movie, and I highly recommend it. And this is an absolute buy, and it is a must watch. And other people will talk about the themes and things of that nature and get into the politics of this movie and the political commentary, etc. Mostly the reason why I don't is because I just don't feel comfortable talking about that subject because I don't feel knowledgeable enough about it. Not really. This movie is designed to make you uncomfortable, and it is gory when it needs to be. It is scary when it needs to be, and it is uncomfortable when it needs to be. And that's all I'm going to say.